Welcome to the second installment of my Gacy series titled Gacy, The Man Behind My Nightmares, Part 2. The Victims, More Than Just a Number. If you have not already seen the first video, please feel free to go and watch that one, as it will explain why I am doing these videos, as well as how I know the information that I know about it. The link is in the description below. Before I continue, I would like to take a moment and remind everyone that this is a horrible story to tell and some details may be graphic. I will try to minimize that aspect as I have done previously, but I also want to be true in telling you who these boys were and what happened to them. I also want to remind everyone that they were more than just the number that was assigned to them as their bodies were located. They were all young. They all had hopes and dreams just like any one of us. Some may have had a troubled life, some may have been looking to make money to survive, some were looking to make money to buy things, 2 were looking to make money for their weddings, 1 was looking to make money for his wife and baby at 20 years old. Some were just looking to party. But none, and I mean none, deserved what happened to them. This part will be the graphic part. If you do not wish to hear the details, please fast forward this video until the next picture shows up, which is about 3.5 minutes. I debated about putting any of this in this video, but I think in order to be as real as I can be about this whole thing, I have to share the real story, and that includes these details. This did not happen to every victim, but it did to many. I will not state what happened to who in any further details, besides what I am sharing now. Gacy ended the lives of at least 33 young men. It is believed there are several more, and Gacy has even said that all of the bodies had not been located. He buried 26 of them in the crawl space, 1 under a barbecue pit he built, 1 under cement in the garage, 1 under the dining room floor, and the rest were thrown into the Des Plaines River. His victims included people he knew as well as others he grabbed off the streets. Some came willingly thinking they were going to drink and smoke. Some came with the promise of a job. But some were also taken by force. Gacy had a fake police badge and a spotlight on his car that he would use to lure victims over and making them think he was the police. He would then take them back to his house and would usually offer them alcohol or drugs. He would tell them about being Pogo the Clown and show them a trick. The handcuff trick. He would put them on himself and then free himself and then tell them to try. Those that did were met with the reality that they had just committed the biggest mistake of their life. Gacy would laugh and tell them the trick is to have the key. Once they were restrained, Gacy would start with the torture to them. This is a watered-down version of what he has admitted originally to have done to many of them. He would sit on their chest, making it hard for them to breathe, so they were forced to open their mouths. You can figure out what for. He would torture them by burning them with cigars, making them act as if they were a horse as he was behind them, pulling on the makeshift reins around their necks. He used himself, he used adult toys, he used various objects. He would frequently shackle their feet to a 2x4 using handcuffs. He also taunted them throughout, including almost drowning several in the bathtub just to revive them and do more. He would then use what he called his rope trick. He would take a rope and make a tourniquet and slowly turn it to apply pressure using a hammer. Occasionally they would convulse for a while before finally passing away. The ones he didn't use the rope trick on, he just shoved something in their mouth so they asphyxiated on it, usually their underwear. He would then keep many of them under his bed for hours, some even a few days, until he would put them in the crawl space. He would spread quicklime all over the crawl space to try and hasten decomposition as well as mask the smell. Some he even took out to the garage and embalmed them and then buried them. When I do the video about Gacy himself, I will get into more detail about this, but he did work for a funeral home for a brief period in Iowa. All but the last 2 were believed to have been ended between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. Graphic, I know, but I promise, it is toned down quite a bit. These next few minutes will show you each person that has been identified, and their number in order of them being found. Most in Gacy's crawl space, but there were also a few located in other areas on his property. 1 in the garage, 1 under his barbecue pit he built, and 1 under his patio. There were also 4 recovered from the Des Plaines River in different locations. I think to better understand the whole story, I should try and tell the story in the order they were ended by him. You will see that the amount of time in between the first known victim and the second one, and how it just kept escalating from there. You can also see that so many of these young men look like they could be related. So many looked so much alike. I wouldn't necessarily say Gacy had a type other than them being young and convenient to his desires at the moment. Timothy Jack McCoy was Gacy's first victim. He was born on May 14, 1955, and was only 16 when he was picked up by Gacy at the Greyhound bus terminal in Chicago on January 3, 1972. He was returning home to Omaha, Nebraska from a holiday trip in Michigan when he met Gacy. It is unclear how he came into contact with Gacy. Gacy claims it was for a paid hookup. They went back to Gacy's house. Gacy stated that, after hooking up, they had a few drinks and had done some drugs, and Gacy nodded off. Early the next morning, Tim woke him up after making them breakfast, and in Gacy's foggy mind he didn't know who it was or why someone was there, and he ended up using a knife on him. Tim ended up passing away from this, and Gacy then buried him beneath the kitchen floor. He later went and put concrete over the area. He claimed to have not called the police because he panicked because he was still on parole out of Iowa and knew they wouldn't believe him that it was an accident. Tim's parents, however, do not think that Tim went with Gacy voluntarily or did anything with him voluntarily. Tim was known to be a down-to-earth young man and always happy and the life of the party. He could also be a little mischievous and was known to hitchhike as well, and his parents think that is how he came into contact with Gacy. In 1972, he had spent Christmas in Iowa with family members before traveling to Michigan to spend the New Year with other relatives. He boarded a bus in Michigan to Chicago on January 2, 1973, and had a 13-hour layover before the next bus to Nebraska, and it is believed he decided to look around at the city when he met Gacy. Tim was discovered in December of 1978 and identified by dental records in 1986. He is also the only known victim to have passed from stabbing instead of being strangled. Tim was known as Body Number 9. Gacy revealed that the next victim was in 1974. Gacy admitted to strangling him and then hid him in a closet. He also disclosed that after some time, the body started to leak bodily fluids and stained his carpet, so he then buried him outside and built a barbecue pit over the area that he buried him at. Gacy also stated that after this incident, he learned to make sure and stuff either rags or the victim's own underwear in their mouths to prevent it from happening again. Gacy was also known to stuff items into the anal cavity as well. This victim remains unidentified. He is believed to have been between 14 to 21 years of age, leaning more towards the older range, however, since they think he may have been married due to a ring on the fourth finger of his left hand. He also had brown curly hair. He is believed to have gone missing sometime between 1972 and July 1975. This is John Doe number 1 and is labeled as victim number 28. He was discovered on March 9, 1979. I am unaware of any further information or description on this person, but if you know of anyone at all who went missing in this time frame, it never hurts to notify Chicago about them, because this is still an open case until identified. They all deserve their name to be remembered, so no missing persons report is going to be looked at as stupid. John Butkovich was the next victim. John was born on September 15, 1956 in Croatia. When John was young, they immigrated to the USA for a better life. John was a hard worker, and he was working in a hardware store when he was 16, and he met Gacy there. Gacy offered the teen a job at PDM with a much higher salary, so of course John couldn't say no. He had a long-time girlfriend he was saving up to marry one day. John had a great personality and made friends very easily. He was always polite and would go out of his way to help someone when they needed it. He would stop by the apartment building and ask my grandma if she needed anything, or even Marion Gacy when she was still living there. Please watch the first video for clarification if you haven't seen it yet. The link is in the comment section. John even helped Gacy's sister move to Arkansas. He was close to the whole family, including Gacy's wife at the time and his 2 stepkids. Or so he thought. He also took me to the pool a few times and to McDonald's as well. He would tease me saying he was a better jump roper than me and he was better at hopscotch as well, and would play either for some time before leaving. On July 31st, 1975, John had reached his limit of patience for having not been getting paid for several weeks of work and decided to confront Gacy about it. He was never seen alive again. According to what Gacy said, John and some friends confronted him about his paychecks, demanding to be paid right away, or they were going to kick his ass. They supposedly worked out some arrangement. Gacy stated that they smoked some marijuana and had a few beers and the teens left. Shortly after that, Gacy says John showed back up yelling at him about his money. Gacy says he put him in handcuffs and told him when he settled down he would let him out of them. John told him he would end his life if he didn't let him out of them, but Gacy said, "If anyone is going to die, it's you, John, not me." He also stated that he sat on him at times trying to calm him down, as well as laying down with him for a while, hoping he would go to sleep. Gacy provided no more details as to what happened from that point on as to why he strangled him, but I think we all know why. He put the body in the garage with the thought of burying him in the crawlspace as well, but his wife came home from a trip early, so Gacy couldn't put him there, so he put him under cement in the garage. Years later, after being arrested, Gacy would take detectives back to the house and draw a stick figure right over where he put John's body. John's dad later found the car parked near Gacy's with the keys, his jacket and his wallet with $40 in it still in the car, and he knew something was wrong. They contacted the police and even called Gacy themselves. The police talked to Gacy and they believed him over the family, saying John probably ran away because he didn't want to go through with the wedding they were planning. The family called the police over 100 times in the course of 3 years, begging them to investigate Gacy, and the police did nothing. In fact, they refused to take any further calls from them. John became body number 2 and was officially identified on December 29, 1978. He was Gacy's third known victim up to this point, but right after this, Gacy went on a spree, ending 30 more teens within about a 2-year period. Daryl Julius Sampson was born on December 6, 1957. He was also a twin to Harold Sampson. He had been working for a carpeting company in Libertyville, Illinois when he met Gacy. He had been lured there under the pretense of a better-paying job, and since he was saving his money for his wedding, he went there to talk to him about the offer. That was on April 6, 1976. He was identified on November 18, 1979, after having been removed from underneath the dining room floor in between the floorboards of Gacy's house. His mother would spend hours and hours driving around Chicago as well as the suburbs. She called police in numerous surrounding states looking for him. She walked all over downtown Chicago looking. I do want to take a moment and say that the police were not the problem, but sadly, what you will realize as this video goes on, back then the police didn't have the means they do these days. And most teenagers that went missing in the 70s were incorrectly labeled as runaways. They were not taken as seriously as they should have been. In fact, this case in general helped implement the procedures taken nowadays with missing teens. He was labeled body number 29. Randall Wayne Reffitt was born on September 20, 1960 in Lexington, Kentucky. Randall was last seen walking home from school on May 14, 1976. That same day, Sam Stapleton went missing as well while walking home from his sister's apartment. Sam was born in 1961. The two did not know each other prior to this, but they were both located together in Gacy's crawlspace. Randall died from asphyxiation. Sam died from asphyxiation as well. Sam was only 14 years old. Randall was identified on April 12, 1979. He was labeled body number 7. Sam was identified on November 14, 1979. He was labeled body number 6. Michael Lawrence Bonin was born on February 7, 1959 in Chicago, Illinois. He loved playing baseball and painting. He was also very good at fixing things. He had a lot of friends and a very supportive family that believed in working hard. Mike was working at a gas station when he met Gacy. Like most others, Gacy offered him a job at PDM with an unusual high-pay wage, so of course he took it. It was perfect. Or so he thought. It was in his neighborhood, so he could walk there. He lived on Northwest Highway, which was minutes away from Summerdale. It was good money. He knew some of the others who worked for him. Mike was last seen on June 4, 1976, as he was supposed to have gone to Waukegan, Illinois, but never made it. His parents got a phone call around Christmas 1978, not long after Gacy was arrested, and was informed they had found Mike's fishing license in Gacy's possession. He was identified on January 6, 1979 through dental records. He was body number 18 and was found underneath Gacy's bedroom, buried with 4 other bodies that were all put there in a very short span of time. William Huey Carroll was born on August 31, 1959 in Chicago, Illinois. Bill carries over from the last victim, Michael Bonin. Bill went missing just 10 days after Mike did on June 14, 1976. He was last seen in what is known as the Uptown area of Chicago, which is an interesting name because the area was actually considered low-income poverty level. Bill came from a rough neighborhood and had alcoholic parents. His older brother became mentally disabled after sniffing glue, and his younger sister was given away to a care home because his parents couldn't take care of her because she also had disabilities. Bill went missing on his brother's birthday. His brother Robert also had his life ended in 1980, shortly after the ending of the trial. Bill was a bit of a troublemaker and had a few run-ins with the police. He got in trouble for using his dad's gun and shooting at the lights. He also got in trouble for pickpocketing and sex work. It is believed that he was solicited by Gacy and made the mistake of going with him. He was found in the same area as Mike was, as well as 3 other bodies. He was identified on March 17, 1979, and was labeled body number 22. James Byron Hawkinson was born on June 10, 1960. He was last heard from by his family on August 5, 1976, after he sadly ran away from them in St. Paul, Minnesota, when he last called his mother on the 5th and said he was in Chicago. It is believed he made that call from Gacy's house. He went unidentified for 40 years until a nephew contacted Cook County Sheriff's Police because he couldn't stop wondering what happened to his uncle he never met. The family submitted DNA and he was finally identified July 6, 2017, although he was discovered December 29, 1978. He was located in Gacy's crawlspace below body number 23, who was Rick Johnston, and above body number 26, which is still unidentified as of today. September 2, 2024, as well as 2 other bodies. He was uncovered still wearing a shirt, underwear, sock remnants, and 2 necklaces. Although his family suspected from the start that he was one of Gacy's victims, they did not have dental records to supply at that time, and DNA was fairly new. Thankfully, though, they finally have an answer on what happened to their son. Rick Johnston was born on September 25, 1958. He was last seen on August 6, 1976, entering the Aragon Ballroom in downtown Chicago, as he entered to go see a concert. He was supposed to call his mother afterwards for a ride, but was never heard from again. He was a very active young man and loved playing several sports. He was also known to hitchhike. He actually met his girlfriend from hitchhiking. It was assumed that he tried to get a ride home instead of making his mother come back out to get him, and that is how he ended up with Gacy. He was identified on January 1, 1979, after having been found in a grave under Gacy's house, buried in between 2 other men. He was labeled body number 23. Kenneth Ray Parker was born on December 15, 1959 in Nashville, Tennessee. And Michael Marino, who was born on February 8, 1962 in Chicago, Illinois, were last seen together on Clark Street in Diversity in downtown Chicago on October 24, 1976, at an intersection that Gacy was known to have picked up other victims in an area called Uptown, which was actually a very poor neighborhood. They were just hanging out together and were expected home before 6 p.m. as Michael was supposed to go to the movies with his mother that evening. Sadly, Neither was seen alive again. They were identified incorrectly on March 29, 1980. Incorrectly meaning that they were both buried at the same time under Gacy's house, and their bodies had fused together. Mrs. Marino had her son's body exhumed in 2016, and the DNA came back as not his. However, they have determined that when they were found, they were mixed up together and that it is still Kenneth Parker and Michael Marino who were buried together under Gacy's house and labeled bodies number 14 and 15. William George Bill Bundy was born on October 22, 1957. He was an accomplished diver and gymnast at his high school and was well liked by all. He was last seen on October 26, 1976, after he was supposed to have gone out with a friend for a late birthday get-together. He was discovered on December 28, 1978, but was not identified until November 8, 2011, using family DNA. He was also disinterred and was buried in the family plot. His cause of death was asphyxiation. Francis Wayne Alexander was born March 11, 1955 in North Carolina. He moved to New York, had gotten married and had also gotten a divorce before moving to Chicago in 1975, and was working at a bar before going missing, they believe on December 1, 1976, and was 21 when he was ended by Gacy. His remains were discovered in Gacy's crawlspace on December 29, 1978, buried with Greg Godzik and John Sink, and was labeled body number 5. He was finally identified on October 25, 2021, and I am happy to announce is finally getting a tombstone with his name on it instead of this we remember one that he has been buried with. Gregory John Godzik was born on March 23, 1959 in Chicago, Illinois. He is one that for me is hard to talk about since I knew him and his family for several years before he became a victim of Gacy's. I knew his parents. I knew his grandmother. She was actually another friend of my grandmother's. I knew his sister as well. Greg had taken me roller skating a few times with either his sister or his girlfriend. He would also take me out to eat several times. He was an extremely polite young man, and he had only been working for Gacy for a few weeks before he disappeared on December 12, 1976. He went missing after dropping off his girlfriend. His wallet was one of the items collected by Gacy. He was identified on December 29, 1978, and was labeled as body number 4. He was located in Gacy's crawlspace in an area with a few other bodies in it. The next victim was John Allen Zink. John was born on December 9, 1957. He was last seen on January 20, 1977. John had been friends with John Butkovich and Greg Godzik, two of Gacy's other victims. He was also a friend to my family. Many times prior to his disappearance, the three of them would do many things together. I would see them numerous times hanging out, playing ball, mowing the lawn at the apartment building on Miami Avenue. John would stop by the apartment and sit and talk with my grandma. He knew my grandma lived alone, so he would run to the store for her if needed. He helped me make my first lemonade stand and helped me sell it so I could buy the roller skates I really wanted without having to ask for money. I remember him talking to my grandma about how his friend just up and left and he couldn't understand why. Greg Godzik, especially since they both didn't understand why John Butkovich had just left without a word as well. I remember this conversation because it happened on December 26, 1976, when he had stopped by the apartment to wish my grandma a Merry Christmas as well as a happy birthday since it was her birthday that day. He is one I wish I could go back in time and thank for being so kind to my grandma, myself, and Marion Gacy. John had worked for PDM. And just like the others, he was here one day and gone the next. And also, just like the others, the police didn't do anything. They thought he just ran away as well. His parents knew better, but they were ignored. He was labeled body number 3 and identified through dental records in January of 1979. He was buried in the crawlspace on top of one of his closest friends, Greg Godzik. John Prestige was born on November 3, 1956 in Kalamazoo, Michigan. He went missing on March 15, 1977. Sadly, I do not know anything more about him or how he could have come into contact with Gacy. He was the first body to be found, and he was identified on January 6, 1979, and was labeled body number 1. Matthew Walter Bowman was born on June 22, 1958, in Chicago, Illinois. He lived in Crystal Lake, Illinois, and was last seen by his mother, Marie Rich, on July 5, 1977, as she dropped him off at the train station. Matt was a very bright young man who was well liked by his peers, even though he was a bit mischievous at times and was a known jokester. He was identified on January 29, 1979, and was labeled body number 8. Robert Edward Gilroy Jr. was born in 1959 and was the son of a Chicago police sergeant. He was last seen on September 15, 1977. He was identified on January 6, 1979 by dental records and was previously labeled body number 25. What is sad about this one is the fact that the cemetery he is buried at originally had instructions to not give out any information about how he died to anyone who asked. John Anthony Mowry was born on March 13, 1958, in Chicago, Illinois. Although all of these stories are sad, and none of these young boys deserved what happened to them, I think this one stands out the most to me. I personally did not know John, but I did meet his mother after Gacy was convicted. My heart still breaks for her to this day. John had just come home after 18 months in the Marines and was going out for a night on the town. That was on September 25, 1977, and he was never seen alive again. His mother was so proud of him because prior to him joining the Marines, he was starting to spiral out of control a bit. He felt guilty because his sister Judy was brutally stabbed 9 times by her boyfriend and passed away from the injuries, and he did nothing to try and prevent it from happening. He had suspected there was domestic violence happening, but they believed Judy when she said there wasn't. Back then, you only had to be 18 to get into bars or buy alcohol, and many of the bars in Chicago never bothered to card anyone, and those that did would easily let you pass if you gave them a 20, so John was turning to alcohol more than anything else. So when he decided to join the Marines, his mother thought it was the best thing he could do, and he was really turning himself around and looking forward to a much better life. Sadly, Gacy took that away after meeting John in a bar and taking him back to his house to party more. John was identified on January 27, 1979, and was labeled body number 20. John's mom went on to sue Gacy for the murder of her son, and she won $1 million settlement. Gacy's lawyer stated that he was unable to pay and didn't have that kind of money, and because of her, he was unable to collect money for his crimes. The judge ruled that any money he was offered for the rights to his story or anything else would be held in an account to pay off the judgment. That of course got several others to sue as well, and over time, that went on to become the law. Perpetrators could not profit from their crimes. I personally think that is one of the best laws there is. Russell Lloyd Nelson was born on September 26, 1956, in Duluth, Minnesota. Russell came to Chicago with another male friend to work for a contractor. He was saving up money for his wedding, and they had been offered a great-paying job with room and board, so they jumped at the chance. He was also a student at the University of Minnesota and was studying architecture. Russell called his mom on October 17, 1977, to wish her a happy birthday. He was never heard from again. Although his family and his fiancée contacted the police and reported him missing, they couldn't say for sure who was the contractor. He was identified on January 6, 1979 using dental records and was previously labeled body number 16. His mother recalled that his father had come to Chicago to search for him to no avail. She also recalled that when she testified, Gacy just sat there and stared at her like, "So what? Your son is dead." She says she will never forget that look in Gacy's eye. It was like he enjoyed seeing her pain. Robert David Winch was born on October 19, 1961 in Cleveland, Ohio. His family had moved to Kalamazoo, Michigan, where Bob was placed into a foster home for getting into trouble. He ran away from that foster home to Chicago in late October of 1977. He was last seen alive on November 11, 1977. A distinctive tiger's eye belt buckle was found in Gacy's house that was linked to Bob. He was later identified on September 12, 1979 by distinctive marks on his bones from a previous healed injury. His father never stopped looking for him until he was finally identified. He was previously labeled body number 11 and was buried under Gacy's house with another one of Gacy's victims named Tom Bowling. Tommy Joseph Bowling was born on July 5, 1957, in Maryville, Tennessee. Tom was married to Jolie Bowling and had a one-year-old son when he went missing in Chicago on November 8, 1977. He, like many others in this video, was last seen at a bar in Chicago. He was meeting a contractor at the bar to discuss a job offer. Cook County Sheriff's Police and Des Plaines Police notified his family in September 1979 that they had found his body on December 21, 1978 in Gacy's crawlspace, but they had not identified it until then. He was previously labeled body number 12 and was buried on top of Robert Winch. David Paul Talsma was born on November 16, 1958 in Chicago, Illinois. He was reported missing in Chicago by his father on December 14, 1977, after having not been seen since December 9, 1977. He was identified through X-rays on what would have been his 21st birthday, November 16, 1979. He was previously labeled body number 17, and he was the 21st victim identified. His leather bomber jacket was found in Gacy's possession. He was believed to have been buried while still alive. William Wayne Billy Kindred was born on July 14, 1958 in Chicago, Illinois. He, like many others, met Gacy at a local bar. Him and his girlfriend hung out with Gacy and others several times before Billy was last seen leaving a different bar on February 16, 1978. Billy was extremely close to his mother Lola, especially after losing his brother Jimmy in 1972, who was only 11 years old when he passed. His girlfriend always suspected Gacy, but no one would really listen to her. Although she was in a near-fatal accident soon after Billy went missing and she ended up being disabled from it, she was still able to testify at Gacy's trial. She was so uncomfortable on the stand with Gacy staring at her that she finally asked the bailiffs to make him stop. She also broke down in tears when shown a photo and was sobbing so much the judge had the jury removed from the courtroom to prevent them from being swayed by emotions. Billy was identified on May 16, 1979, and was previously labeled body number 27. Timothy David O'Rourke was born on October 20, 1957, and lived in Elmhurst, Illinois. He also went to high school with my cousins. Tim loved to go to the bars and dance. He would go disco dancing every chance he got. His inscription on his tombstone even states that. It says, "If among angels in heaven we could glance, we'd see Tim with a smile, doing his disco dance." Tim is believed to have been murdered sometime between June 16 and June 23, 1978. He is also the first victim to have been dumped in the Des Plaines River because there was no more room left in the crawlspace. He was identified on January 9, 1979, and was previously labeled body number 31. Frank William Landingen was born on July 5, 1979 in Chicago, Illinois. He was Gacy's second victim to be dumped in the river. He went missing on November 4, 1978, and was identified on November 14, 1978. His body was found nude in the river on November 12, 1978. He was labeled body number 32. James Mojo Mazzara was born on May 28, 1958 in Chicago, Illinois. James was living in Elmwood Park, which is a suburb outside of Chicago, when he went missing November 23, 1978. Gacy admits to dumping a body into the Des Plaines River called Mojo and said he was found dead in his house. This is Gacy's first attempt to implement others into his crimes. James was identified on December 30, 1978, and was labeled body number 33. Robert Jerome Peast was born on March 16, 1963 in Des Plaines, Illinois. This is the one that finally blew open the doors to Gacy and his horrible crimes. It is very sad it took this long, but again, things were much different back then. The way information was gathered and stored then was so much different than it is nowadays. Everything took time. But if only they would have listened to the families when they first started mentioning Gacy, many of these young boys would have been alive today. Rob was an honor student in school and was very close to his family. He had a job at Nissen Pharmacy and was saving up money so he could buy a car when he got his license. He was working the night he went missing. During his shift, Gacy came in to do a bid on some work they wanted to have done after the holidays. Rob heard Gacy and the owner talking about the job and Gacy making a comment about trying to find more help because he was so buried with work. Rob heard this and thought it would be a great opportunity to make better money. This was on December 11th, 1978. It was his mother's birthday. His mother had come to the pharmacy to pick up Rob to drive him home after his shift. Rob had run out to her as she waited in her car and told her he would be a few more minutes, that he was going to talk to this contractor about a job. He was never seen again. He left out the back door of the building with Gacy. His mom, after waiting around for some time and him not showing back up, really began to worry. It was not like her son. She talked to the owner of the store and got Gacy's information and called him. She got no answer. The owner tried calling Gacy and got nowhere with him as well. The family waited even longer and still nothing. They knew something was very wrong. They called the police. The police actually took the report seriously and decided to not wait the normal 48 hours that they were supposed to back then and started looking into it right away. During the night, the police went to Gacy's home to talk to him. The car that was described to them was parked in the driveway, so they were fairly sure he was home. They knocked and waited at least 10 to 15 minutes and he didn't answer. They walked around to the back of his home and saw him standing in the back room looking out a window. Gacy was a bit startled as they came around the back and finally answered the door for them. He let them in and they were asking him about Rob. Gacy claimed to have left him there. That he did talk to someone for a few minutes, but claims the kid never got into his car or anything. The police were trying to casually look around for any signs. One officer asked to use the bathroom, so Gacy allowed him. He walked him to it, and then as he was talking to the other officer, he made sure to stay within sight of the bathroom. The officer smelled an odor, but couldn't put his finger on what it reminded him of. The police got nowhere with Gacy, and with nothing obvious, they had no choice but to leave. It is believed that Rob was still alive at this time but was unconscious in the attic. Rob was found and identified on April 9, 1979, after his body was found on the edge of the river caught in some weeds, naked. Rob was the last victim that Gacy ended with his own hands, and by the time his body was located, Gacy was already in Cook County Jail, and most of the bodies at his former home were already found. Gacy also confessed to all these crimes and even drew a map of where the bodies were located in the crawlspace. However, during his trial, Gacy tried to claim insanity, and when that failed, he tried to claim he didn't do any of it, and then he finally ended up saying that he was afraid of someone else who did the killings and that he just went along with it all out of fear. His famous quote was, "Clowns can get away with murder." Thankfully, Rob put an end to that. As I have previously stated, Rob was the last known victim of Gacy. However, in my opinion, there are at least 3 more victims that should be counted as Gacy's victims. Although their lives were not ended by Gacy's own hands, they were still ended because of Gacy. Those 3 are Jeffrey Rignall, David Cram, and Mike Rossi. Jeff was born on August 21, 1951 in Kalamazoo, Michigan. He passed away on Christmas Eve, 2000 in Florida. I consider him a victim of Gacy because in March 1978, Jeff was walking in Rosemont, Illinois when Gacy pulled up alongside of him. Gacy asked him if he wanted a ride and if he wanted to party. Although it was March, it was still pretty cold in Illinois, so Jeff gladly accepted the ride. A very common thing back at that time. That was the mistake Jeff made that began the downward path his life would end up going on. Within minutes of him entering the car, Gacy covered his face with a rag full of chloroform, knocking him out. When he came to, he was in Gacy's home and was restrained. Over the next 24 hours or so, Gacy would brutally assault Jeff over and over and over again. The pain was so bad that he would repeatedly pass out from it. Once he regained consciousness, Gacy would assault him yet again. Finally, Jeff woke up and he was no longer in Gacy's home. He was left outside in Lincoln Park, laying next to a statue in that park, extremely sick and confused. Jeff did go to the police, and the police did want to help him. But he couldn't really give them exact details, like the name or address. Only a description of a car and a partial plate number. Jeff was determined to get this guy, though. He remembered at one point being in Gacy's car on the expressway and going under a specific underpass with a rest area that he recognized. When he got better after the assault, he would spend countless hours sitting in that rest area watching the expressway, hoping to find a car with the partial plate he remembered. He was floored that when a few months later, he actually located the car and was able to follow it. He was able to get Gacy's full plate, his address, as well as provide more information about where everything happened to the police. He also provided information saying he saw Gacy with a few different younger men coming and going from the house on Summerdale. The police were looking into this when Rob went missing. However, it was a different jurisdiction than Des Plaines where Rob was reported to, but at least at this point, everything was starting to come together and they were starting to get a clearer picture of Gacy and his past conviction. After Gacy was arrested and when he admitted to everything, he admitted to the assault on Jeff and stated he had to let him go because he was out of room in his crawl space. He hadn't yet thought of throwing them into the river or of disposing them anywhere else. He said he thought he saw Jeff before at the rest area and figured he was trying to find him. He decided it wasn't worth the risk anymore, so the next few victims went into the river many miles away from where he lived, where they lived or where they were abducted from, but still within driving distance for him to handle. Jeff ended up dying from complications of AIDS. He stated after what Gacy did to him, he didn't feel comfortable being with a woman anymore, so he chose male partners, with him being more of the aggressor. Jeff was a great witness during the trial and was able to expose what most likely happened to the others. Although the details were very hard for families to hear, they at least had some knowledge of what happened to their son and that this monster would never hurt another one again. Jeff went on to also write a book about his encounter with Gacy. He was only 49 when he passed away. David Cram was hitchhiking around Chicago in 1976 when he was picked up by Gacy. For some reason, Cram was able to get away from Gacy on 2 separate occasions when Gacy tried to assault him, but he still stuck around. His sticking around, however, caused him to be accused of being an accomplice of Gacy and the murders he committed. Although he states that he unknowingly dug trenches in the crawl space for bodies, that was the extent of his involvement. Although Gacy tried hard to throw the guilt towards him, he really had no involvement in any of these 33 young men's deaths. His only involvement was digging areas as he was told to do by his boss. The reason why I say he is also a victim of Gacy is because in 2001, Cram committed suicide by hanging himself in a forest preserve in Cook County, Illinois. He couldn't live with all of this and knowing that he helped to dig those areas and that he actually lived in that house for a short period of time above all those bodies. He couldn't handle it. No matter what, there is always help, and suicide is not the answer. If you or someone you know is struggling, please get help. All you have to do these days is call or text 988 for help 24/7. Gacy used to say things like a clown can get away with murder while performing his clown acts. Little did people know that was what was happening in real life. Gacy was one of the best liars I ever knew. He was so good that little did we know that he was. I knew several of these victims. I knew several of these families. I got to know even more families as the trial went on and the case played out. A few of these kids may have been runaways or had some run-ins with the law, but not one of them deserved what happened to them. They were more than this, but for so long, they were only remembered by what this horrible person did to them. Their lives were so overshadowed by their number that they became known as. I hope in some small way I helped remind people of their actual names instead of just what happened to them and the number they were assigned when found. To me, there is still so much more to this story. I hope you will continue on my path forward as I continue to share this story with you all.